Welcome back to the Hall of Fame College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Watkins, and if you love college football, you're definitely in the right place. So before you forget, smash that red subscriber button, like our videos, and don't forget to ring that bell so you don't miss one moment of the Hall of Fame College Football Podcast. I'd like to welcome everybody into the show tonight. Adela, Laura, welcome back, Laura. I got a couple of Tech fans starting to show up around here a little bit. I'll try not to say too many bad things about your old Red Raiders there, Laura, but yeah, no, we won't be saying too much bad stuff tonight for sure. Unless we're talking about Pac-12, it's getting, the rumors are just continuing to swirl. And there's quite a few reasons for it. That first and foremost is the fact that there's so little real information coming out of the Pac-12, and so you have a lot of what seems to be opinion or spin as to what's kind of happening, dominating really the news cycle and the whole thing about it. What I would tell you is that the reason that there's one of the main reasons that the Pac-12 and Commissioner George Kliavkoff are in this situation, not all of it's his fault. A lot of it you could place on Larry Scott, his predecessor, who had a lot of issues going on within that conference, not the least of which was trying to prop up the Pac-12 network without any real mainstream any real mainstream entities such as ESPN, CBS, anybody like that really being behind it all. They thought that they were going to be able to profit off of that. They really haven't been able to. And now it seems like they got to get rid of it. Well, the thing is it might be good that they have it, because nobody seems to want to step up, least of all ESPN, who is really the only major network left that has any interest whatsoever. And if you believe some of these rumors, it's pretty much the interest is dying down. The ASU guy, I'll get to that in just a second. So right now you have being reported by Salt Lake City's, I don't know if you guys watch the show. It's actually pretty entertaining, but the Monty Show. I don't know how much of it is, he seems pretty credible. He's got quite a following there in that Salt Lake area, whether it be BYU or Utah. But he is reporting that ESPN and the Pac-12 have not spoken in weeks. You also have, which doesn't sound overly far-fetched to me in view of the fact that Amazon that's another rumor. Amazon I don't even know how much of a rumor that is. But apparently Apple has jumped into the mix, where before you had just ESPN, Amazon were the only two that were really looking to jump into this. They were looking at around $20 million per team between the two. And it was going to be and it's still looks like it's going to be a mostly streaming deal. Nobody wants to do this. Nobody in college football wants to be the first to go to an all streaming package. It's kind of similar to when nobody wanted to be the first to go to a cable network with their games in the NFL or college football for that matter. Nobody wanted to be the first to do that. Now, if you're somebody like the Big Ten or the SEC, you could probably pull it off because you are the big boy and everybody wants to watch you. When you're the Pac-12 and you just lost the two entities or the two schools that are in the biggest market in your conference to the Big Ten, and your next two big boys are screaming no about streaming any of their stuff, you're looking at You're looking at a situation there where this is a bad deal, and it's a bad look all the way around for the Pac-12. What's up, fellas? How's everybody? Um, but so as I said, you've got ESPN. Apparently, they put their final offer on the table. It's $100 million a year for the conference. It's only going to be maybe a couple of games, from what I can tell, per week, kind of fill-in games. They don't really want a lot of tier 1 stuff, which would be your Oregon, Washington kind of stuff. Um, and really, what else? I mean, aside from their games, what other? And maybe, well, that's the whole thing about it is really with those games are going to be considered tier 1, but you've got the conference champions back to back being Utah. What are their games? And then what are the games for Coach Prime and the Colorado Buffaloes? This is a scary scenario. If you're Coach Prime, he's probably pretty used to this in view of the fact that they had a ton of people watching them week to week on a streaming service at Jackson State. But for Colorado, they can't be happy about that. They've got their new coach that's bringing it, and you're getting less size. And that's really what this whole thing is about, is the fact that nobody wants to do this all streaming or majority streaming deal because of the fact that, well, it's going to take eyes off of the program, off the conference. Not that there was a ton of them on it anyway. If you look at what we have, I pulled up, let's see, I've got a couple of things I could show you here. So the TV ratings for this past season, and this was kind of surprising to me, but if you look at the TV ratings for the last season, you can see right here that, well, let me pull that comment off of there real quick. The TV ratings for last season, now these would be, you've got in millions, obviously, but you've got it separated between teams that are leaving their conferences and the teams that are staying around. Now, only one game, even from the teams that are leaving these major schools here, USC and UCLA, only the game between them matched up with the highest of the top 10 from the Big 12. So TCU and Baylor, it was right up there with them. Now, as you can see, all the way to the top 10 down, it was pretty much by the Big 12 beat them across the board. But to me, that one, a TCU Baylor game, that's big around Baylor and TCU and Dallas area and stuff like that. But these are far from the marquee teams in the conference. Sorry, Logan. But it's true. Even though TCU was in the college football championship game this week or this year. Now, but the second highest one was Iowa State TCU. What? That's crazy to me. I almost think that could be a free. It seems like that one would have been a typo, but I looked it up twice and it's real. Oregon and Washington did 3.6 million views to TCU and Baylor's 4.35 million. So in the end, when you start looking at this, we can break it down. Let's see. Let's go. So you've got, plus 770,000 views for that second highest game. Where are the rest of these? I had them. 1 second, folks. I got them right here. So, as you're looking at, let's see, let's go with number 3. I think I still need one more. Okay, so you had plus 840,000 on the number 3 game. The average for the top 10 games, in the conference that weren't being played by either Texas, Oklahoma, or USC and UCLA, you averaged almost 600,000 more viewers per game. Now, some of that could be, you could say that a lot of that has to do with the fact that, well, part of it is that these are late night games a lot of times. Now, some of them weren't. These marquee games weren't. I mean, even the USC UCLA game, that was not a night game. So that didn't have anything to it as well. There were a lot of games on ESPN Plus. That's correct, Laura, and I agree with that. But you know, in the end, no matter what, the average of the top 10 games is 2.61 million views to 2.01 million. There are a lot of those games that went later. One of the ones I would tell you would have been the SC game. That was a later game, the first one against Utah. They only did 2.74 million views, which is fairly surprising when those are the two schools, or that was, a big game. But the Utah, Oregon only doing 2.54, that's almost 2 million less than TCU Baylor got. And I'm pretty sure that was a daytime game as well, or an afternoon evening game. It wasn't the late night slot for sure. But, in any event, you're looking at a situation where, it's pretty clear that even as much people as want to say that the Pac-12 is worth more money and it's a better conference, that's really not the truth. And the other part about it is this, and this is what I would tell you is the major issue that you're running into if you're the Pac-12, and it's the fact that it was a mess up on the part of George Kliavkoff, and that's period. You've heard guys like, the former CEO of Fox Sports talking about that doing a major streaming deal is not going to work. But here's the thing. Somebody told him during their negotiation window that they were worth 40 million plus. And they stuck to that because when they didn't get it, which they weren't going to get it, obviously, they let that negotiation go through and never signed a deal, thinking that once the Big 12 got their money, that there was going to be some left over. Big mistake, because the truth of it is there's a lot of different things that are there other than college football that the deals are coming up in the near future. And there's just not as much room on linear television to put all these games out there. When you start thinking about ESPN, they already have the ACC exclusively. They're about to have the SEC exclusively, and they've got the Big 12. Now, there's another one of the rumors when you start thinking about this, and one of the rumors out there is that you have, now that the Apple deal started being floated out there, as they're going to take over in place of Amazon, or maybe as an addition to, because Amazon apparently only wanted to do like one game a week, and it was going to be like a tier 2 and 3 game. But so they start looking at Apple, and I mean, what, they're going to carry all of it? Because ESPN doesn't want to. And when you start thinking about it, and one of the other things that's been out there, and Pete Thamel put it in his story that was on ESPN Plus the other day. If you haven't read that, you probably should. I'll read some of it here in just a few minutes. But one of the things he talks about is the fact that Amazon, there's a possibility that they could redirect some of the money they had planned to pay to the Pac-12 in order to finance the four corner schools, being Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah, coming into the league, into the Big 12. Yeah, listen, there's a lot of issues with what's going on. Who would stream it? The schools itself. That's the other part of it. Okay, so here's you guys are right on. You guys are absolutely right on point here. Thank you, guys. Right. Correct. And I agree with you on that, but YouTube is not involved in this. YouTube is not involved in this. So what would have to happen when you're looking at this, because Apple doesn't have a production company that has trucks that can go out there and do a game, right? And neither does Amazon, for that matter. They always use CBS for that Thursday night game or whatever, right? So no matter which way you slice it, you're going to have to get somebody involved in this to do the production, unless, of course, you keep the Pac-12 network around and their talent, whatever, if you want to call it that, to do these games. Now, they do have the ability to probably put it on, but nobody wants it. Nobody wanted it. So, no, Amazon doesn't even want the best game from what I understand. Because of the fact that Oregon and Washington are so dead set against this, and this is the next problem. They have said all along that they would not accept a majority streaming deal. They want to stay on linear TV. Because as I told you, there's only probably a couple of conferences out there that could do it, and they don't even have to. If you're looking at the SEC and the Big Ten, could they probably pull that off? Yes, because their content is that sought after. But when you start thinking about all the people, CBS is out of it. Fox is out of it. They're not even involved. They even tried to go to Turner Sports. Out. Not doing it. NBC, not interested. They're already doing a evening game on the Big Ten once this new deal starts, right? So it's out. So somebody is going to have to, right, you're exactly right. Since these guys are already out, they would have to pay one of these companies to come in and put it on, unless the Pac-12 somehow figures it out and does it, since they do have a freaking production company. But they've been wanting to get rid of that. That's a big expense that they did not want to keep. And that's a big problem that what was going on with the Larry Scott era in the Pac-12 was the fact that there was just so much expense there, right? And then it's just, as much as he did a lot of that, yeah, CCT. Correct. So a lot of this, it's just one of them deals where you look at it and there's not a lot of options here, right? There's not a lot of options. And then you look at Dennis Dodd's story today, and I mean, his sub headline is Pac-12's inability to land a media rights deal is reaching a concerning point. Now, most everybody has come to the conclusion over the last couple of weeks that somehow they're going to keep this conference together. And we've talked about this on this show a couple of times, that if you're talking about schools like Utah, and even I got into it with a guy from Washington yesterday, that they think that this culture difference is going to be a big thing, right? And going to get in the way of all this. And then, of course, Utah is just being out of line with some of it. Of course, it's mostly their fans. The AD has piped in a few times that, and I guess I get it, that you need to stay on the side of the Pac-12 if you're in it, right? Discovery Warner. Hey, yeah, you were talking about that last time, James. I love it. But so let's just go through some of Dennis Dodd's. He was talking about how last year ESPN executive Burt Magnus created a ripple in the industry when he suggested conferences should be focused on cultivating rivalries in college sports rather than worrying about market size. The amount of time that we spend thinking about market size, it pales in comparison to the amount of time we think about rivalries. In college sports, it's the rivalries, the traditions, the brands that really aggregate audience. Right. Which is why you're looking at the SEC right now with bringing in Texas and Oklahoma. They just brought in another major rivalry, one of the top 5 rivalries in college sports. And if you're the Big 12, and now that you have BYU, why are you not? I mean, obviously Utah's not interested. They really, I think that Yormark definitely should be working that angle quickly. Now, you can definitely understand this as contextualized by the latest round of realignment of the Pac-12's remaining lifelines is the selling rights holder on the value of those rivalries, such as they are with USC and UCLA off to the Big Ten. To get an idea of the value of such Pac-12 rivalries, CBS Sports found the top 20 rated Pac-12 games, not involving them, combined over the last 2 seasons were, okay, so they're showing the Oregon-Washington game for the last, and then for 2 years, Oregon versus Oregon State, Stanford, Cal, and Oregon versus Washington. I'm going to present this. So as they're talking about, if you can see here in 2021, you had almost 5 million watch the Oregon-Washington game, right? The next year, it dropped down to 3.6 million. This is this past season. And then Oregon State was right around the same. Stanford, Cal, yeah, nobody cares about that one as much. I mean, they do, but 2.75, and then Oregon, Washington, 2.6. If you remember the top 10 games that didn't involve them, they only average about 2 million, the top 10. So Oregon played in at least 3 of the highest games overall without USC or UCLA across the last 2 seasons. Those may be as close to lasting rivalries as any in the new Pac-12. Right. But how do they compare against competition? Well, they don't mostly. That might explain why the Pac-12 is having so much trouble finding worth for its media rights. When UCLA and USC left, the Pac-12 was stripped of 23 conference games involving these teams that were among the top 20 most watched on a weekly basis. Now, for all the people that think that this isn't the same kind of issue that they're going to be facing in the Big 12 once Oklahoma and Texas leave, you got to remember that it is. Because every year when you start looking at some of this stuff, they generally are. I mean, obviously the Red River game is huge, but the Bedlam game was a big deal. That's gone now. And even the Red River game is gone from the Big 12. So now you have to start hoping that those other ones are holding up. Now the good news is that they did this past year. The most watched game in the Big 12 last season was TCU at Texas. It had over 5 million people watching. Now, it was in prime time as well. But that being said, now that you lose those 2 big entities, it's the same thing that they were talking about before. Now, you did replace them with some quality programs, but this you wonder why Yormark continues to say that he's trying to expand and they want to make sure that they're in that last time zone, the 4th time zone. That's why. Because he knows, and believe me, don't get it twisted. The people that think it's going to be Fresno State or somebody like that, it isn't. Okay? It isn't. The pro-rata deal tells you that you would have to take out of the conference's existing teams piece of the pie to pay a non-Power 5 school, because ESPN is not going to pay it, and Fox is surely not going to pay it. They're not involved in the pro-rata as it is. If you're able to go out there and get Oregon and Washington, who are damn sure not happy about this possibility of streaming most of the games every week, now you might have an opportunity. Now I could see them paying an equal amount, and even with an out clause or something like that. Do I see them doing an unequal share? I can see it possibly happening. I don't think that they should do that. I don't think that that's the right way you're going to want to do it. Now, they don't have the production and television trucks. Well, the thing is Stoops Defied, they actually, I don't know that they have the trucks, but they do have production companies. In the truth of it, that's exactly right. No matter what you look at, they're going to have to pay somebody else to come in, and that's the issue. That's something that we were just talking about. Now, 15 of the Big Ten Conference's games were rated higher than the Civil War, which is 3rd on the list in the Pac-12. Ohio State by itself appeared in 6 games in 2022 that were rated higher than Oregon and Oregon State, and they didn't really play anybody all year. I mean, literally, they didn't until they got to the Michigan game and the Penn State game, Michigan, and then the first game of the season they played Notre Dame. I'm sure that was it. But those are 3 games that we're talking about. The rest of it was against that trash conference, and it was trash. Okay. That being said, in the past 2 seasons, the SEC and Big Ten combined to have the top-rated conference game in a given week 10 times. The Pac-12 has had 3 such games, not involving USC or UCLA in the top 10. So yeah, rivalries matter. And again, when you take away USC, they're everybody's rival in that conference. Just like Texas and Oklahoma kind of served as everybody's rival in the Big 12, or everybody hates them anyway. It's a game that you're going to pay attention to if you think that your team has an opportunity to win, right? Yeah, Fox losing $75 million a year should have been the canary in the coal mine. Comcast revelation. That's another part of it too. And the $75 million a year figure, I've heard different things about that, but this Comcast deal is something else that when you already owe that. So this is another reason that it's starting to look so shaky, right? And I agree with you as far as the unequal revenue share. But here's the thing I would tell you, and I don't see that happening. First and foremost, in fact, most people, and even some of the industry leaders, and you're the people that are closest to this story are telling you that they're not even going to get an equal share. What I would tell you is that I feel like Fox would more than likely pitch in for, say, Washington, Oregon, because of the fact you want to be able to put them on your channel, right? Now, the other thing I would say is, why am I? Okay, I'm mentioning Tech, and Tech is going to be one of the top teams. But where do they draw on there? They weren't in that top 10. That's why I haven't mentioned them just yet. Now, when they win, they will be. You know that, and they're one of those teams that's going to definitely, they're going to be in the mix now. I feel like they are with Joey. They're going to be in the mix now. What I would tell you is, most of these industry leaders, as I said, aren't even expecting them to get an equal share. I would think that you would want to, in order to make it happen, if you need to, with, say, Oregon, Washington, maybe Colorado. Now, first and foremost, Utah is not going to agree to this until the ship is already gone. Once, I think you're going to need these other schools to kind of do that, right? And I love it. I love that I'm getting all these. Yeah, the big never comes calling. Right. I agree with this. Now, this is a good point too. According to a lot of sources, a lot of people are saying that, and I'm not sure if I believe this or not. They're saying that Brett Yormark has offered as much as 125% of the share to Oregon and Washington to come. Maybe. And it would definitely probably have to come from that money, which that extra money that came back from Texas and Oklahoma, smart move, do it that way. Even if it was on a temporary basis, you're strengthening your foothold in college football right now, in major college football right now, and theoretically you're killing off an entire another conference. So it's worth doing it. And that might even be worth paying that extra money. What I would say is, I don't know that you really have to do that. And I agree with what we were talking about, is that no, that's paying back. Okay, so I don't know if this is Christian or Logan on this Lone Star thing, but that money is being used to pay back the newer schools. No, it's paying back the legacy schools that already paid the newer schools. So that money's coming back to you guys, 80% of it. The other 20 was going to Fox. So that but I mean, if it wasn't coming back to, if all those schools agreed to say, hey, no, we can let that slide, then that'd be great, right? And that way you strengthen. And here's the thing, you have to look at this in the long term. And I know a lot of these schools, when you hear Kuz talking from Kuz's corner, he's the West Virginia guy, and they seem to be very worried about losing any money on a year-to-year basis, that they can afford this and that. But what you really can't afford is to lose your conference, right? So if it takes you kicking up an extra bit of cash or doing whatever you got to do, it's L dog. There you go. Perfect. All right. If you do whatever you got to do to survive here, and I believe that that's where Yormark's at. And this is why I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. I don't know that that necessarily has to be, because of the fact that I know that I was watching the Sikkim 365 the other day when they had Softy on, and they weren't, it was unequivocal. They're not going to do it. Softy's the guy that he covers them. He's, I think, a TV and radio personality there in Seattle. He covers the Huskies. And his deal was that's not something that the streaming deal is a non-starter for these guys. And that's not the first place I've heard it, right? But that's the only people that are left in this thing. Unless there's somebody like I read in the Pete Thamel story the other day, unless Kliavkoff has somebody that nobody even knows about, then it's going to be, you know, it's a no. There's no way that they can make this happen. Now, yeah, spend that $8 million wisely. Listen, and I agree that you want to do that, but here's the thing: in Stupsify, that would be the only wise way to do it. And Laura, you are right in thinking this. I don't know how many folks are on board with this deal, but as I said, I mean, and if you don't get behind that, what I would tell you is that you are not cementing your place in college football moving forward, because right now you still don't know what's going to happen after this next round. Now, something else that I heard today, and this may not be good for the Big 12, in fact it would be terrible, is that it appears that the Big 10 possibly is looking at going ahead and adding Oregon and Washington. In which case, here's the one thing I would say to that is that's fine if they're off the table, right? Then you definitely go get those, because you're still killing off the Pac-12 as you know it. You're going to get those four corner schools are surely going to leave, because you just lost the other two major breadwinners in that conference. So now you're looking at a Pac-12 that's no longer a Power 5, and you have a Power 4. So you gobble up as much of that real estate as you can, right? You just do. And the truth is, even if you were to bring Oregon and Washington in for the time being, it's probably just for the time being, for whatever they can, whatever he can negotiate them to stay. If he's going to let them out to go to the Big 10, I would probably want them to stay for over like a 60% of the contract is what I would probably do. This is just me thinking out loud, but that's where I would be. Yeah, but okay, so there's the other thing that he's going to 1,000% wait to see how bad the Pac's best offer. Right. Yeah. Well, and everybody pretty much knows. I think that the best offer possible that they might get is $25 million. It's at $20 million as far as we know. But let's say, unless I saw on the Monty show, they were kind of theorizing yesterday that if Apple TV came in overpaid and said, "Yeah, we'll give you 50 for all of it," which nobody seems to think that's going to happen. They even, they wouldn't overpay for the NFL Sunday ticket. That's a known commodity. They wouldn't overpay for it. They kicked it out, which surprised me. Yes, Washington and Oregon was always a dream, but the four corners, those are the ones that are most likely. And I got to tell you, with Deion Sanders, they should not be discounted. I'm going to tell you now, that first week that they go play TCU, watch what the numbers are for that thing. Watch what the numbers are for that thing. It'll be out of control, right? Everybody's going to tune in. And it'll be like that week after week after week. Even when they're playing crappy schools in the Pac-12, everybody, think about the week when they play SC this year. Think about the week, I haven't seen their schedule. I don't know exactly what it looks like, but think about when they play a better team, Utah, which, again, they could be a four-corner school with them coming to the Big 12. But the other part of it is this is a former Big 12 school that had its only success in the Big 8 and Big 12, right? From that time where they had it from it was in the 90s to up until around 2000 where they were any good. They have only had one winning season in the Pac-12. I don't see Colorado wanting to stay in the Pac-12. I don't know why they would. Now, even if they did get to that $25 million, but and I don't know that they're gonna, but let's say they did, and you're $6 million behind the base of what you're gonna get in the Big 12. and that's of course theorizing that you're going to give them a full share, that Fox will go ahead and pitch in on the pro-rata as well. They don't have to, but they probably will. But let's just say that you're trying to do that to make sure that you go ahead and kill them off. As I said, a lot of people are there, oh, well, they'll just stay for that 25 million. I think there's no freaking way, because that 25 million, the money part of it, again, it what does that matter? As you just heard Dennis Dodd saying on this story, that it's all about the rivalries. It's all about the rivalries, right? So none of that's going to matter, especially in Texas. What are we saying? Right. Oh yeah, for Coach Prime, absolutely, absolutely. He's lived in Dallas for most of his career in the NFL, especially once he went to play for the Cowboys. He coached football. He coached high school football in Dallas. Deion Jr. played at SMU. He is Dallas, right? Um, you know, and I agree with you on this. They are the top priority, in my opinion, Logan, because of the fact that they're the ones that you're going to keep the longest, right? They're the ones that you could keep for none of those four schools. Somebody said the other day that Utah's being looked at by the Big Ten. That's a bunch of crap. It is a bunch of crap. They don't want nothing to do with that. They don't even want anything to do with Colorado. And Colorado is much more, quote unquote, sophisticated and on that level than you would look at Utah as. Okay. And I listen, up until all this ugliness that I've seen the last so much amount of time from Utah, I mean, they would be like the Pac-12 school I liked, because, of course, they beat USC twice last year in Lincoln. So that, I mean, and I also think Coach Whittingham is one of the top 3 or 4 best coaches in the country easily, and he does it with less talent than what a lot of these other guys do. I think it's clear that he showed who was the best coach in that between him and Lincoln Riley. But so I agree with you on this. I think that they have to be a priority in the view of the fact that these are guys that you can build the conference with, right? If down the line you want to add more power schools, because make no mistake, it's not going to stop at 16. Okay. The ACC deal is starting to come apart. That's another part of that Pete Thamel story that's out there, that I would guarantee you that it's not going to go to 2036, because if it does, you're going to fall so far behind. And even at that 25 million, let's say the Pac-12 is at that 25 million, that's $75 million less than what Big Ten and SEC is going to be making towards the end of that deal. Plus, they're getting all the time on television, right? You're over here on a streaming platform. Even if you did it for 4 or 5 years to like bridge yourself to the try to get yourself another deal after that, how are you going to build up the value for another deal? I mean, what are you going to do? The truth of it is this thing probably died when Kliavkoff didn't take that $31 million that the Big 12 did take. Brett Yormark has clearly outmaneuvered this guy. I mean, he's been in the conference for 9 months, and he's done everything that Kliavkoff has failed to do. And I don't care what is being said on Twitter. I don't care what is going on. Hey, what's up, Bodie? Good to see you, man. I don't care what they're trying to tell you. The bottom line is simple. It's how are you going to build up any value? You just lost your 2 best guys. SDSU and SMU are going to bring you value. No disrespect to SMU, no disrespect to SDSU for that matter, but they're not USC and UCLA. They're not. And San Diego is not LA. So they keep that, if they bring them in there saying they keep Southern California, nobody in Los Angeles gives a crap about San Diego State and is going to watch that football. Nobody. They don't even watch the Chargers, and they're in LA now. They don't. So it's as correct. And that's exactly right. That's the other thing that I was going to say. What you're looking at at least 50 million. And it's going to jump up when you add those four corner schools, because you look at, if the Arizona schools aren't going to bring you the best football product initially, probably, which I think Arizona State's going to get better as long as they don't have some crazy, ridiculous time that they're like on probation or whatever for whatever their stuff was that happened under Herm. They've got a great coach coming in. Kenny Dillingham has proven to be one of the better offensive minds in the game already. He's a young guy. He just got Jaden Rashada after that debacle there in the Slack 12, maintaining the subpar standard. Yeah, you're right, man. Yeah, so and again, I feel like it's going to get better when you add these other schools, right? It's going to get better. and that's the other part of it. They're talking about Gonzaga. Gonzaga has turned down the Pac-12. Gonzaga coming in as a basketball school. That's where apparently where this streaming stuff would come into play to kind of make some of these other teams whole, even if Fox doesn't chip in to the product. Again, I feel like Fox, even though they didn't sign that part of it, the pro-rata, and agree to that offhand, because they I think they wanted to wait and see what it's going to be, right? They want to wait and see who are you going to allow in. No, we're not just, ESPN smartly said it's got to be a Power 5 school or we're not in, right? They could change their mind if they wanted to, if you have the right school. But does San Diego State move the needle? Does even SMU move the needle if they come into the Big 12? Even though it's a Texas school and the Big 12 is largely in Texas, do they move the needle enough for that to matter? Probably not. Okay, probably not. If Tech wins 2 more games, conference could have a nice. Hey, listen, I'm going to tell you now, the basketball conference, and that's the other part that people don't realize. Right now, what do you have? There's not really, aside from Oklahoma being just yuck on the basketball floor this year, Kansas State, and Kansas is always there. Kansas State has an unbelievable coach. So does Baylor. Tech, yeah, they've been playing great. If they hadn't had such a god-awful start to the season, they'd be. Texas is still, even without Chris Beard, Texas is still looking really good. Pretty much the entire conference. Oklahoma State, very good. They're right up there at the top as well. This is top to bottom. They're really, really good. 7 locks. Yeah, I think you're right. Then you go ahead and you add in Arizona's a blue blood in college basketball, right? Arizona State has Bobby Hurley, who has built that program into something that's worth looking at now, right? Once USC's gone out of that conference, what good is that going to be for them? They need to be out. Yeah, and you're right about that. But all I'm saying is year in and year out, you're looking at a product that's you're gonna have a bunch of teams that get deep into the tournament, and you're gonna get more money from that, from CBS, from ESPN during the conference tournament time, and from I guess even Fox too. Right? And the streaming services, one thing I'll tell you is this: while nobody wants to be the first to go, almost all streaming, if you're in a position where it can supplement and everything. And the major reason people don't want to go all streaming is because, first off, if you think about it, think about yourself in this, and you can throw it in the chat if you want to. How many streaming services are you paying for now? Most people have Netflix and Amazon Prime. Right? I don't know a whole lot of people that, they only have like 40 million subscribers to Apple TV Plus. You have some that'll have whatever for ESPN. You can give me some. I know everybody has a streaming service. On average, I think most people already have 2 or 3 or 4, right? Let me know if I'm off on that. How many people are going to want to pay to watch? Now, as a college football junkie, yes, I would probably pay $100 to watch that. $100 to watch all the games. But as somebody said yesterday, and it was probably Josh Pate, but I don't think it was. But you need the casuals to be buying this in order for it to be worthy. Because what the biggest problem isn't necessarily the money. It's the exposure, which messes with your recruiting, which it's not just the money that you fall so far behind in if you stay in this conference, but it's the fact that you're not getting looked at during that time either. And you can hope and pray that streaming works out to be how everybody does things nowadays, right? It's probably 10 years down the line before that, at least before that's all you do. I'm a 100% stream guy, but I don't watch that much freaking TV. You know, again, yeah, a lot of people have a bunch. If you get Arizona, you get Gonzaga, you get and listen, I don't know how many people remember this, but Utah used to be insane in basketball when they had Rick Majerus there coaching. They haven't been great these days, but I'm telling you now, yeah, cancel subscriptions, do all that. But yes, there's so many things that you just forget about the whole thing, and you don't even having Amazon Prime doesn't mean that you have everything. You got to buy other stuff to go with it if you want to watch any of that, series and things like that. Again, I don't watch a ton of it, but you've got Paramount Plus, which is one of those ones that everybody's on nowadays because of I guess it's what's the one called with Kevin Costner in it? Everybody loves that show. But a lot of people are doing it for like one thing, and that is definitely where you're headed. And it's one thing if you're the SEC to take a gamble on that, but they're not going to do that. They don't have to. They have one of the best deals there is, Oh, they were insane good. Yeah, Rick Majerus was no joke. No joke. I know Rick well. Whenever I used to cover, there was for a while I was up at Albuquerque, and we were, obviously, the Lobos there. Listen, that old WAC conference when it had BYU and Utah and UNM and UTEP and good grief, dude, they were real good. They were real good, and I mean he was in a couple of national championship games. They didn't win it, but they were close. Yellowstone, yeah. In any event, the basketball conference, while everybody else is kind of looking at that as like it doesn't matter to them, right? It does matter to the Big 12 when it comes to revenue. When you're the best conference, the ACC was living off of it for the longest time, right? The longest time. Look, yeah, the problem with the Pac-12 is culture. Yeah, and I hear that all the time. But here's what I said to the guy yesterday that said that he was a former Husky athlete and that it matters, right? I've been covering college sports for the better part of 2 decades, and I can tell you this: I've watched sports everywhere from Washington to freaking North Carolina, South Carolina, all that other stuff, right? I've watched them everywhere, and I've seen teams from across the country meet in different scenarios for the entirety of that time. I covered Tech for a few years when Coach Knight was there, and we went to Madison Square Garden. That's not exactly Lubbock culture. Okay. I'm telling you that I've been to Duke. I've been to Carolina. When it comes to basketball, I've been to Texas A&M. I've been to Husky Stadium up in freaking Washington. Right. I've been to a lot of places, and I can tell you one thing. While yes, they had different cultures, they got different cultures in Chapel Hill than they do down at Clemson. Okay, they do. One thing I know, those cultures don't mean jack when they get on the field and play. Right? And if you're Washington and Oregon, you might open up a pipeline that Oregon is more of a national recruiter. Washington, not as much. You could open up a pipeline to one of the most fertile recruiting grounds that there is in Texas. You get in there and you build some kind of, you build a team that you're winning it. Because if you think about it, these two teams are going to come in. They're going to be among the better teams in the Big 12 immediately, just like Utah would be. And Utah already has a good pipeline going. That's one thing. Coach Witt has a good pipeline in Texas. Dallas particularly. He gets a lot of his kids from there. It only helps you in that. I feel like it would improve these teams tremendously to play in this league. Now, are you the same as the rest of these folks? Yeah. 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 Listen, and here's the thing. You're right. You're exactly right. I did see that kid in the All-American Bowl. He ain't that good. So I think, and I don't think Bo Nix is great either. But here's the thing. It doesn't really matter with Oregon so much, but it could definitely help them because they can already recruit. I mean, they're a popular amongst kids. They're popular, and that's no matter where. Yeah, exactly. Do you want to do it just for football? And unless you're a Pac-12 fan or whatever, it look, it's not about the folks that are big fans like you, Bodie. It's going to be those casuals that aren't going to do it. That you're not going to get enough eyes on it. What are you going to do about down at the bar in Seattle, people that are wanting to watch the Husky game, right? How are you going to do that? It just bottom line is there's just so much less visibility that it makes it bad. It makes it bad for them. You get it if you get those two teams into the Big 12, they're immediately one of the big money makers in the Big 12. Period. Now, and then think about it. Utah gets in there. Now you get the Holy War again. You know, these rivalries are what matters, just like Dodd said. Okay. You get the Arizona schools, they hate each other too. And their rivalry games are fun to watch, basketball included. All of it. All of these things matter. You've still got the TCU Baylor rivalry, big time. You know, you're going to have Oklahoma State's got its rivalry with Baylor. That's kind of been brewing a little bit over the last few years. Although as long as they keep Gundy, I don't see them really doing great. No, the Pac fans aren't going to support it though. No, I mean, here's the deal. They will if it means that they stay relevant, though. And believe me, if let's say one of them comes in and wins the Big 12 the first year in the league, oh yeah, they'll support it. And think about this. It's great, if you could continue playing your rival or whatever, which they're rivals too. Oregon and Washington, big rival. Okay. As far as I know, I'm not, aside from on the Four Corner schools, I haven't heard a ton of stuff out of Arizona, the Arizona schools or Colorado saying that they don't want to do it. Yeah, Tech was in the border. Yeah, that was New Mexico State was in that border conference with them that back when they were great. You're right about that. The border conference. I'm glad you brought that up. That was also UCLA was in that conference too. Or no, they weren't. No, they weren't. They were no, they weren't. Because I know that the times that New Mexico State got into the Final Four, and the times that they didn't, they kept getting knocked out by UCLA, but it was a regional thing. All right. So in the end, all I'm going to say is this, is that when you start looking at this stuff, all of these rumors that are out there, the only ones that aren't really that aren't telling you that this is bad. I was just watching Josh Pate before I came on. He's saying it's, and even he's saying it's bad. And this is a guy that's eternally thinking that it's going to work out. Now he doesn't so much. Canzano and Wilner are out there putting out all kinds of BS on a day-to-day basis. And these guys are actually working at major newspapers and they're out there lying. Yeah, UTEP was in it. You're right. Right. But, and are they going to buy that? Here's the thing, Bobby. Are those casuals going to buy $100 worth of freaking Pac-12 stuff? If let's say it's a flat rate $100 like they've discussed. No way. No way. They're not going to do it. For one game, they're not going to do it. That's not going to happen. But so all of this is going on, and you keep hearing that. And like I said, unless there's a entity that we don't know about that's been sitting back waiting to pounce, which makes zero sense. Because if that was the case, I don't know. It makes zero sense to me. I don't see it. But you've got Wilner and Canzano and Utah fans, of course, and a few fans from here and there that are dead against this, right? that some of them are saying, no, it's not going to happen. What's more likely, Pac-12 getting a non-streaming deal for more than 25 or might? Yeah, no. Well, no shit, Sherlock. I like it. That's a perfect name for exactly what you just said. Yeah, it's not going to happen, and so it's unlikely. Yeah, I think they could hit those smelling salts on old Mike and have him come out easier. It seems like. Um, I just don't see it, man. Billie Jean is going to be great again. Here we go. Gonna sign a deal with Pac-12. They receive zero tolerance. Yeah, and again, and that's the other part of it is even if you do this, and let's say Apple gave you 50 million, what is it going to cost though? And Apple will. I've heard a lot of this stuff that they will pass on the production stuff, and they have to the rights holder or whatever, that they're not going to just pay for all that production cost. And again, they wouldn't even overpay for the NFL Sunday ticket, which is probably the most profitable thing out there when it comes to buying pay-per-view sports. DirecTV was born on the freaking Sunday ticket. That's what carried it all these years. That's it. I mean, period. Yeah, what, PBS? Yeah, I don't see it. Yeah, right. And I mean, yeah, that's public. That's up to the Vanderbilts and all them to decide how much money they want to kick into, because they're the only ones that yeah, they ain't got the money. Probably. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. And that's the thing. They would have to work that out. That's a good question. In the end, how much is a bar going to be willing to pay for this streaming service unless you're in those locales, right? I mean, how much? Me, as I said, I got a college football show. I'm obviously a college football junkie. I'm probably going to figure out a way to get it. You know what I mean? Even though, but I'm only going to watch a couple of games, and you know what, end of the night, there's some good games on, whatever. But that was considering that you still had UCLA and USC in the mix. You just took away a big rival for almost every team left. USC, everybody hates USC in that conference. Every one of them. The other 11, right? Some more than others, but the other 11. Yeah, I've heard that it would be like $99. Yeah, and that's because they were talking about the MLS. Exactly. So I don't know. It could be more, could be less. It probably, I don't know what it would be. But you would, in order for you to make enough money for that, if you figure $100, well, let's just add it up. What would it be to get, say, 20 million in value? Or let's say 40 million in value, because that's what they thought that they were worth. There's 40. So you need 400,000 subscribers at $100. I don't know. Yeah, and that's a lot. Again, here's the thing. And if it's okay, so how many people are going to pay for Apple TV? So because you would probably have to have that subscription too. And there's a total of 40 million that pay for that. 40 million. Amazon has 200 million subscribers, right? It's ridiculously, again, it isn't even as much about the money though, folks. And that's the whole point that I'm trying to make here. The money isn't even as big a deal, even though it is a huge deal, but it's not as big because of the fact that what it really amounts to is what happens to your program when you're no longer visible. You're not being shown on TV anymore. Do kids are going to continue to go there just because you're Oregon and you wear a yellow helmet or you've got those crazy looking uniforms? Well, nobody sees those crazy looking uniforms if you're not on TV. And if their parents, I mean, some of those parents can and can't afford it, are they going to be able to afford to watch it on streaming every week? It takes away from your program in the recruiting, and it won't take long with the money that's, and I mean, it's going to continue to grow money wise in college football, but it isn't going to take long to fall behind. That, and you know what? That's another thing. Kliavkoff should have just, I mean, he should have been all over a merger. That whole looking down your nose at everybody. Yeah. It is. It is. And they're all going to be watching what? They're all going to be watching the Big Ten. They already don't go to games that much, but they're going to be watching the Big Ten. So think about it. The exposure part of it is the important part. And this is the thing that if you at this point, and I guess that's maybe there's another rumor that they've been floating that out there that they might be willing to merge now. Well, I bet you are. But if that's the case, I would merge the conference I would do it. But if I'm Yormark, I'd be like, yeah, well, we're merging it, but this is getting you the hell out of here. Right? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. The Ted Lasso conference. Hey, I like this. Let me see. If they stay together and sign with Apple Plus. Listen, yeah, the only reason that I've had, it is a great freaking thing. But I got to tell you, I usually let it expire until it's time for Ted Lasso again. So again, I'm not big on it, but look at how many people are going to want to add that to their already what they're paying. And a lot of people feel like they're paying too much as it is. You know, James was talking about it earlier. He was like, man, I got to get rid of some of these, right? You start looking at it. I didn't realize how much I had like 2 years ago. It was a year's worth that I was paying $60 freaking a month for, and I had cable at this time, not for cable, just for the other apps that were on there. No way. That's over 600. That was like $700 a year. Get the crap out of here. I'm not doing that. So I got rid of all of it. But like, seriously, I don't understand how it could go any other way but badly. Now, I guess, I mean, the thing is that I know that so many of these schools don't want to go. And now I think the four corner schools are pretty much in. It seems, and particularly, what were you saying about what Jason Shear said was it from Arizona or was it Arizona State that was saying that, Laura? What were you talking about? I was going to look that up. Was it on Twitter or something, or what are you talking about? That's how they get you. Yeah. Yeah, neither is Jason. Man, hey, speaking of money, if you guys want to help this show, I mean, if you're going to kick some money for some of your college football, do me a favor and throw a tip in there. You know, I really love interacting with you guys, and I try to do it as much as I can. Definitely, when you throw a tip in there, you're always going to get that interaction for sure. You can either do it through Venmo or Cash App. Those are actually the preferred ways, and you can do it all the time. Or you can hit that super chat heart, buy some podcast merchandise. You know, you got your all your horns down stuff in that one. For our Oklahoma fans, you got to check out that. Hey, Bobby, you got to check out in the pod merch, the 5 B's of Oklahoma. I think you'll think it's funny. And then, of course, you can always go onto our Fanatics partner site, get up to 65% off everything in the store. It just depends on what it is. Obviously, it's up to 65% off, but the deals change like every other few days. You get I'm a hat person, and I usually get all my hats for around that $20 range, even though they're usually now $30-$35. But we get a small commission anytime you buy that, but you get up to 65% off, and those deals change all the time. A lot of times it's free shipping, all kinds of stuff like that. So it's one of those deals. Let's see, Bearcat, what was he saying? If Mountain West have more TV exposure than the Pac-12? Yes, because they have a TV deal. They will. And that's the whole thing. Is like, to me, everything that these folks from Utah are saying is like, man, You barely got into a power conference. You're really willing to just go down with the ship and end up back in the Mountain West? And that, why did everybody want out of the Mountain West? If anybody remembers all of that, right? Why? Because they had that stupid freaking channel as well, just like the Pac-12 did, right? They all had that stupid channel, and that was the only place you could watch their games. And like DirecTV wasn't carrying it. It took a while before the other. I think the only one that was carrying it at first was like Comcast Cable, so you couldn't get it on Dish, you couldn't get it on DirecTV, none of that. So you're looking at, let's see. Ray Anderson tells, yeah, oh, will be a solid enough financial situation to keep this conference together. Yeah, that's the okay. Yeah, I did see that. What I would tell you about that is that that's because they haven't announced what the deal is, right? Now they're trying to say now that what they're trying to do is um prepare everybody for doom, right? And what I'll tell you is I've also heard that the Arizona schools decision is going to be connected to what happens with Oregon and Oregon State, or Oregon and Washington. And here's what I would say about that though too is like, okay, let's just say that Oregon and Washington do stay in for now, right? And as I told you earlier, I'm starting to hear that the Big Ten may actually be contemplating this, like what would be the financial ramifications of them doing such a thing, right? So they may be back in on this. In any event, it's this is one of the things that I like to. Let me show you this one right quick. This is one of the things that Thamel said yesterday. Let me pull that up. Let me do. Okay. Uh, so what he was talking about in this was your these looming changes, and when he got into talking about the immediate future for the Pac-12, it's the most uncertain, and especially when you start thinking about that stupid vote of confidence. That's the thing that gets every coach fired ever, right? When they get a vote of confidence. Then you've got, and the other thing that, and I thought about this when they were doing it, when he was announcing that he was going to talk to SMU and that they were in talks with San Diego State, which to me, that just lets you know that, and he says it in here, that those 10, that they weren't going to be financially stable at 10 members of the conference. And as much as they keep saying that they have SDSU in the fold and presumably SMU, why aren't they then? If you're so sure about that, why aren't they? And not that it's going to make a huge deal. But in any event, look, if you start looking into it as, all right, where was it? The future of the Pac-12 hinges on the cornerstone schools, Oregon and Washington, and really the interest level from the Big Ten in poaching them. The bad news for a long-term solution is that Oregon and Washington are seeking exit plan. Looms is an eternal issue. Like, for other words, it's going to keep going until they're gone, right? Considering the financial disparity that they're going to face with the SEC and Big Ten, what I just said, they hope to compete against nationally, sticking in a watered down Pac-12 conference that's adding group of 5 schools that nobody cares about for the next generation appears unlikely. And it's hard to be conference acres if you're flirting with the Big Ten, right? Even if you had a financial windfall, which I don't know where that's coming from, and that's what he's saying here, unless some financial windfall comes. They're always going to lack permanence thanks to the financial and potential competitive inequities that come with USC and UCLA exiting the Pac-12. And that is exactly right. Think about that for a second. It's just not feasible to stay, right? Yeah, Ray Anderson was covering his. Yes, absolutely. Um, Jeopardy music starts. So yeah, I mean, but think about that. It's exactly what I said. Even if they do it right, let's say they stay and they hold together for another couple of years. Can you afford to do that if you're Washington and Oregon? Oregon might be able to afford it a little more, but not really. I don't know that you can afford it because you're already not winning the national championship. In fact, they've only been to one CFP, and it was like the first one, right? We're in what, year 11, 12 of the CFP? They were in the first one when Chip was there. So they're already not getting there. And they got a good coach. He comes from a good line. But in the end, what is it? Yeah, they're going to have to kick it down the road until the music stops. But in the end, if you don't see, here's the deal. This is the kind of crap that gets university presidents fired and certainly conference commissioners fired. When you lose that kind of, the visibility part, let's make it clear. Why do you think college sports started? Okay. It's really not about that. Now it's its own entity and makes a crap ton of money. But what is it really about? It's for visibility of the university, which brings in more students to the university, which is what their real money is, right? If you're not being seen week after week, nobody knows about you as much. The whole Oregon, explosion over the last 15, 20 years is because of Nike and because of that visibility, and they got good, right? If you don't see them on TV, it's that whole thing. If a tree falls down in the forest and nobody's there, does it make a sound? It doesn't. It doesn't. So the bottom line is that even looking ahead, let's say they try to hold it together, for Ray to say that, Ray Anderson to say that, he's towing the company line right now, right? He's towing the company line, even though I know for sure that Arizona State's been one of the more vocals about leaving the conference. One of the one that's more pissed off about what's going on. You can't wait until it gets to this point, Bobby. That's the whole thing. When the product is beyond garbage and Apple increases its fees, right? They're going to, and again, how many, even if you, right now they're saying a majority, and I don't know what a majority number is, because I know for sure that Amazon was talking about they wanted to do like one game. They wanted to do a Wednesday or a Friday night game, which would be a tier 2 or a tier 3 game, which that means that you're talking about Arizona against Oregon State or Arizona against Cal or something like that, right? Nobody gives a crap about that game, just like nobody gives a crap about that Thursday night game on Amazon. But it's improved over time, but that's not what they want to do. That's not what they want to do. So, and I don't know what the deal is with them and Apple. They haven't really said, but they're talking about them doing all of it. Okay. So that means that all of it, aside from whatever you get out of ESPN for 1 or 2 games a week, and not necessarily tier 1 with them either, because they don't want to carry it. They have all the tier 1 that they need between the 3 conferences that of the now Power 4 that you already have. It's not going to work out, man. It's just not going to work out. And because looking into the future, the longer you sit around there and wait, the further behind that you get, particularly when the Big Ten and SEC start paying their members $100 million a year. And they're the ones that are all over television week after week after week, because they have all these rivalries in them. Think about the SEC for a second. Think about the SEC. You've got the Egg Bowl. That's not even big to a lot of people, but it's big in the SEC and people like to watch it. And Lane Kiffin's there now. Especially when Leach was there, it's fun to watch. Obviously, the Iron Bowl is huge. You've got Georgia, Florida. You've got lately, obviously, Georgia, Alabama is going to come up if it gets around playoff time. And when they expand to the 12 teams in the playoff, they're probably going to see each other more times than they're not. They're going to go to a 3-6-6 model more than likely in the SEC, that you're going to play every team in the conference every other year. right? So all of these rivalries are going to happen all the time. Tennessee is going to play Alabama every year. You're going to get LSU playing probably Florida, or I don't know exactly how they're going to do all this stuff, but there's a lot of these that are going to have huge, huge implications on them. Well, let's think about, you've kind of gotten a Baylor and Tech, Laura, have gotten yeah, a complete, yeah, I'll let you explain that. Think about it in the Big 12 though too. It just for the sake of what we're talking about here, you've got Baylor and Tech are becoming a pretty good rivalry because why? Because of part of it is basketball, obviously, but even in football, well, you've got Joey McGuire who was there with Aranda, and he's been a coach around the metro. I mean, the guy's won state championships, and he's one of the legendary coaches in the state as far as high schools are concerned. He's doing the first time ever you've got a top 25 recruiting class. I mean, wow. I didn't even know that was possible in Lubbock. It wasn't possible for Mike Leach to do it. He didn't do it. What's up, bro? How you doing, man? Yes, they are. Yes, that's what we're talking about. And and again, you've got, so that's a nice rivalry. It's going to continue to build because now that you don't have those two schools that everybody hates, right? Again, the Baylor TCU rivalry is as bitter as anything I know of in the Big 12. Huge, bitter. These new schools that are coming in, they're talking a lot of smack on the way in. Everybody's going to hate UCF by the time they get there. They talk more crap on Twitter than anybody. I mean, Oklahoma State, if they would get their shit together, but yeah, of course. And Oklahoma State, yeah, and everybody hates Oklahoma State. So yeah, you're going to have those, but then you also these new teams that are coming in. BYU is going to be a problem. I can promise you that BYU is going to be a problem, and that's just going to be, yeah. And you know what? That's pretty much what he was doing. When he died at Mississippi State, that's where he's usually at, because he's one of those coaches that he does more with less. He doesn't care really that much about. He's going to get the guys that fit him, and they're going to score points no matter what. He doesn't need, a top 10 recruiting class. That's not what, and he was never going to get it anyways. But that's, what I mean. But that being said, those rivalries matter. When you start looking at the SEC, you've got the big rivalries there as well. And again, you got Tennessee and Alabama's one. Obviously, Alabama and Auburn. Auburn and Georgia is the oldest rivalry in the South. Then you have places like South Carolina is starting to build a rivalry that they've got with Georgia. As long as they have a decent coach, they will. They play Florida a lot. All these SEC schools, they have these built-in rivalries already, right? The only ones that kind of don't, and I think that you help that by bringing in Texas and Oklahoma, is like Missouri and Arkansas. They're going to get in there and get to start playing Texas again and some of those other ones. So you start looking at those every week, all the games are going to be they're going to have eyes on them, right? You go to the Big Ten, trashy as the conference is, you start adding in USC and UCLA, that's an immediate, they're all going to want to beat them. When you get your Michigan USC game and your USC Ohio State game and your USC Penn State game, that's 6 games right there that are, and UCLA too, that are going to be a lot of eyes on them. Then, of course, you've got the Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State against all those teams that we just talked about. They've got their built-in rivalries there as well. Luke Fickell just went to Wisconsin, and he's going to throw the crap out of the ball. They're going to start winning around there. I think it's about time that a freaking Big Ten school went to the spread. Surprising that it's taken this long, right? Yeah, and we didn't even bring up Prime. Think about this. He's going to come in there, and everybody's going to want to kick his ass because he talks trash all week, right? It's good for TV. If you get these guys in there, it's good for TV. Right now, without these Pac-12 schools, and there's only one game in the whole conference last year in the whole Pac-12 conference that even was as good as what it was. It was TCU and K-State that they drew the same. Yeah, that's gonna be. Hey, Bobby, I'm gonna pull this one up here. USC in Wisconsin in the wintertime. Tebow's gonna freeze his little freaking chestnuts off, isn't he? All right. Yeah. Graham at Purdue will be interesting. Yeah, I mean, again, I like Graham Harrell. I think he's definitely he earned his shot here. He earned his shot. I was kind of surprised that he didn't go and take the job at Mississippi State, but he earned his shot for sure. I'm just saying this, and I don't know how many fans are going to be following USC all the way out there. There will be a few. And especially as the new, but one or two times. That's the other reason I've always felt like that the Big Ten is certainly still going to be in this, and that's the whole point. Is that even if they survive for the next couple of years, is it really surviving, or is it prolonging your death and making you weaker? Because if your schools are going to get weaker, and that's the whole point. If you're not getting the right recruits because you're not getting exposure, and you're that far behind in money, it just doesn't make sense for this to continue on. Yeah, you could, I guess. I don't know. Nobody likes them. So just so you know, nobody likes Texas. Okay. So you can do that if you want to be the new Texas. Horns down. All day long. Okay. Let's see. What does it say? Was Texas Tech upset enough to pay Leach's state money? They shafted him. Oh, yeah. I'm not going to bring that up at all. Behave, Stoostified. And that was crappy of them, though. I will give you that. I will give you that. All right. Folks, let me know what you think about any of this stuff. Where are we at? Where are we at? Am I wrong on this? I mean, is there any possible way that they could, like, I mean, aside from, say, even if you had Apple come in and overpay, which they don't do, is there any way that this works out? And if you're these four corner schools, if you're Coach Prime, if you're Colorado, for instance, let's just say you're Colorado, right? You've been crappy the entire time you've been in the Pac-12. If you could get a partner to go with you, do you not want to do this so that you make sure that this guy's on TV every weekend? Because he's not going to be in the Pac-12. Watch, he will be every freaking weekend. They're going to have him on somebody's station every weekend just because it's Coach Prime. If they're winning, holy crap. And they should be winning. Yeah. Prime has to want to go back. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's recruiting ground for him. Which ones what are we talking about as far as the NIL and stuff like that? I was going to bring that up a little bit. But is that what you're talking about, James? I don't really see if we're going there, I wouldn't tell you that I think that that's a problem. What I kind of had to assume that was what we were talking about. What? Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I think some of them are. I don't see the Arizona schools like that. I don't see Colorado that way. If you're Colorado and you're being prideful, what are you being prideful about? Because you've had one in 11 seasons, they've had one winning season. One. They haven't won a bowl game. And now Texas is gone. Texas and the Lone Star are gone. And almost immediately you become a major player. The guy's already recruiting. They went from like 68th in recruiting a year ago to 21st in overall when you figure in the transfer portal and stuff. They were number 5 in the portal. He's gotten the number 1 corner the last 2 years in a row. His son is Shador, the quarterback. His skill set's similar to Caleb Williams. They're going to win. They're going to win. Yeah. Yeah. They have to. They want incomplete. Oh, I did see that. I hadn't seen all those rules yet. That's stupid. That's stupid. I don't know how that would go, but I can't imagine that that's worth a crap. Listen, I'm all good for. Look, some of these, because of the spread, is probably what this is about. Because you get some of these games that'll go 5, 6, 7 hours. I'm good with some things continuing. I saw the one that I saw that I would probably be okay with, and I mean, like on a first down, maybe the clock continues to run until you get to a certain. I don't know how the rules are going to go, but I don't think that you can make these big, huge, sweeping changes and keep the game the way that it's supposed to be. I mean, that's just me. I'm not okay with that. I don't need the game to be that different, right? I mean, and most people, yeah. We should shorten games so we can run more ads in their place. And it's the NCAA is a useless entity when it comes to college football at this point. What do they got to do with anything? None of the stuff that they say even really matters. I don't think it's very long until they're going to end up with, particularly when this new 12-team CFB starts, I think they're going to end up having to get a czar that's a commissioner over all of it, which is, I mean, that's a big difference too. But it's essentially, that's kind of where it's headed. And when you start looking at some of these lawsuits that are coming over obviously the pay for play kind of stuff, and like where they're wanting to unionize the players are, and you can't really blame them for that. That was the next thing that I was going to talk about, was that NIL stuff. There have been some changes to it over the last few weeks. The major one that I saw was Governor DeSantis in Florida had taken off the restrictions on coaches being able to help facilitate a deal. Now, they're not paying them themselves, but allowing them to help them. And here's what I would say about this. There's always going to be the ability for impropriety and stuff like that, except for the fact that the kids definitely deserve to get paid, particularly what the explosion in salaries, I mean, in money and revenue, period. When you start looking at the Big Ten got a $7 billion contract, and the SEC's is like right behind it. I mean, dude, you got to pay them. But if you're going to continue to have, and they can start like kind of working this out where you've got some incentive to stay at some of these schools, you could get rid of some of those problems with the transfer portal. Which I've been saying this for a while. This is what needs to happen. If you want to stop the portal from being so ridiculous, and they should want to do this. Okay, guys, if you hadn't already hit that like button just now that I'm looking up, I don't see how many likes. It's showing just one. I hope I got more than one like in here. Come on. What I'm saying is, the more that I have been saying this for a while, is that rather than saying that the schools can't be the ones paying, when we all know damn good and well that it's coming from the schools, why not just go ahead and let it be what it is, pay for play? Because at least that way you have to show what you're paying. Maybe you do. I don't know if you put a cap on it or whatever it is, but at least you would know when somebody was doing something wrong. At this point, they can just, we're not the ones paying them, so they don't keep up with it. And then it's all on the players, and they're not helping the players to hold on to this money. They're not helping. I mean, there's no responsibility in this whatsoever. It's just wild, wild west. So apparently the DeSantis deal that I saw, that took those restrictions off of them. Part of it was also, which I really liked, that it requires all of them to go in and have financial awareness courses, teach them how to manage their money. That's a smart idea. They should do that from freaking time you're a little kid. you know. These are things that should be being taught in society. I think we all know why they're not. But then you start talking about that's exactly what, oh yeah. Yeah, that's and that's again, I'm gonna have to look into some of those rule changes though. That'll be on the next show on Tuesday for sure. We'll start talking about that. Squeezing time from the field of play, create more time for average. Yeah, absolutely. You're right about that. And I'll give you that. And that's the thing. And they're talking, and when you start hiding it behind player safety and BS like that, I don't want to hear that because that's not what it's about. And just like it's when they started talking about, you've heard the Pac-12 saying stuff like, oh, that's just too much travel. But it's too much travel unless you get the Big Ten and you got to go further. Do you care about that then? Because you don't. Look at West Virginia. Look at how far they got to travel for every game. At least Cincinnati's in their neighborhood now. There's a game or two that they don't have to go all the way across the country to play in. In the end, with this NIL stuff, I think that and then it also the legislation that just went through that's a federal. Now, there's still some. There are still some guidelines in place for it, but the schools and conferences can't limit a student athlete's ability to be compensated for their NIL. They can receive professional representation, which is something that's necessary. I don't know. That was all dependent upon kind of what was going on in the state, but they have to be licensed in the state, which is good, right? Participation in NIL related activities would not cannot impact a scholarship or eligibility to play. NIL agreements cannot be in conflict with the existing team contract, which is good for the school, right? So, like if like at Tech, what is it? It's United, right? United Supermarkets is one of the big ones at Tech, right? So, Safeway or who would be the other ones? Marketplace. No, Marketplace is part of that. So you wouldn't want HEB you can't have one of your players going out there and doing something for HEB. That's good for the school, right? Schools and conferences and associations cannot compensate a student athlete for their NIL. I don't understand that part of it, and schools may restrict student athletes for participating in vice industries, so they can't just go out there and be promoting porn and stuff like that, which is a smart thing, right? Player can hire a manager for that. That now they can. It wasn't one of and they could in certain. That's the whole thing, is that they needed it to be a little more across the board. Now there's still going to be some state laws that are going to govern some of it, but it's starting to look like the ones that already had it. They've been. I think Florida was one of the last ones to kind of change the rules as far as how they're governing that. But the main thing is that if you listen to Jimbo and his diatribe all last year about how they didn't pay their $30 million for that greatest class ever. Why would he say that? Because you can't be involved in it according to the NCAA, which is a Nick Saban thing. And all of that is just BS to me. Yeah, Texas can't peddle Tito's. Yeah, same kind of thing. Vice Industries, any of that kind of stuff. So all that stuff is going to be in play. I think the more that you start kind of regulating some of this, and then the other thing that I did see was that they were talking about now these third-party advertisers and stuff have more access to as a whole, so that you could be in regional and local NIL deals and stuff like that and be an influencer for them, which is what this was all supposed to be about to begin with. It wasn't just supposed to be give them some cash to play football, right? And that means that there's going to be something expected of you in addition to you being an athlete, that there's some a certain amount of time that you have to give to that to give them value for their money. This is good because you're teaching these kids responsibility and having a job, and like, it's not it's not perfect, but it's one of those deals, right? Yeah, we are getting to a I can't believe I talked an hour and 37 minutes already. Thanks a lot. Good to see you, Logan. Have a good night. Folks, don't forget to hit that like button. It's so important to content creators like myself. But what do you think about the way that where I was going to say, I also feel like this will kind of help with the transfer part. And that's the one thing that I've been the most worried about, and not necessarily for the team that I root for so much as, I mean, that's obviously an issue, but that's everybody's same issue, right? The point that I'm trying to, last year, which was the biggest year um for that, where you had so many people in the portal, 40+ % of those kids didn't play again after that. That's an unsustainable model. And with, when you've got that much money being paid to these schools, those networks aren't going to be happy with that for very long, because the level of play is going to go down. There's got to be some kind of incentive for you staying. And if they are able to work it with the school and say, okay, we're going to put you in the pool of our brand, right? Kind of like what Tech is doing with all of the kids getting $25,000. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot of money, but for a kid, it isn't bad in addition to whatever else you can get. And you can't limit what they can get. I mean, obviously, they're going to be limited on the amount of time they have. But look, the bottom line is that this is going to, the more that you give them the opportunity to make some money, the better off you're going to be. And, you're never going to get them to stop transferring altogether. And particularly when you start talking quarterbacks, they get there and they think that they're supposed to start. And if they don't, they're going to leave. That's just how it is. More times than not. But if you can give them some cash and say, hang on for another year, you know what I mean? You might even have a better chance. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And what is it that I think Texas was doing something where all the offensive linemen get like 40 or 50 grand. So some of these ones that they're not going to be as marketable, I mean, as your quarterback or your leading scorer, receiver, Bijan Robinson, if you're Texas, you know what I mean? They're not going to get as much local play like that. And some of these guys wouldn't get any, but you could get a guy that say, that there's always that dude on the defense that, like, nationally he's kind of known, maybe not, but he's like everybody in the crowd loves him, right? They yell for him every time he sees the field. He's always making a play. Those guys could get opportunities that they wouldn't, and it's not going to be on a national basis, but it opens it up for them to do it everywhere. That's helpful all the way around, I feel like, because I do feel like you're going to have to incentivize it. Otherwise, you cannot continue to have all these. The other thing that's hurting, and I'm going to tell you now, just in terms of, I've been trying to help a kid get recruited, some kids get recruited all year, and a lot of them didn't. They either went to a JUCO or had to go to a smaller school, because so many of the you had so many of the kids that were in the portal that are moving around. So if it's easier for you to go, somebody that's already been in a college weight room, somebody that's already been on that program and that's got a little bit of experience, they'd almost rather go get them, even though if they hadn't played. So now it's hurting your recruiting from the high schools. And look, the portal game it's not sustainable for teams either. I mean, there's usually a reason why some of these guys haven't played, right? Not everybody's coming from Oklahoma or from Alabama, where they got 10 or 15 freaking 5-stars. So yeah, they're going to lose some every year, right? But that's not the case with everybody. And some of these kids don't understand it, and they never end up playing again. Literally 40% of those kids did not end up in another program when they entered the portal last year. They didn't. So if you're not at one of these blue blood schools and you enter the portal, it's dangerous, right? And I think that's going to start correcting itself too, because of the fact that they're going to see that. But if you can incentivize them hanging around, okay, this first year, we're going to give you 25 grand. If you stay around for year 2, it's going to bump up to 35. The year after that, it goes up to 50. We'll give you 100,000 if you stay all 4 years. That's incentive enough to stay, right? And there's no reason why none of these schools can't do it, particularly in these big conferences that are making this kind of money. You know? Yeah. Anyway, yeah, we can't do it 2 hours. I gotta get. Thank you, Adele. I appreciate that, folks. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. I appreciate it, and I hope everybody's enjoyed hearing me talk. I still got 30 people in here, so it looks like it's been okay. But again, look, I really like to have some of these subjects that we're talking about come from you folks, and I enjoy really interacting with all of you guys. Right? I enjoy it. So make sure that, hey, throw some of that stuff out there. You can always get me, obviously, on Twitter at BirdieManDub. And then, you can throw them in the replays of these and stuff like that, or some of the things you want to talk about. We will definitely talk about that rule change. That is definitely on the rule changes will be on the Tuesday live for sure. I'm going to get back into, I mean, obviously this subject that we've been talking about for the most part tonight on the entirety of this realignment and expansion, that's not going away until we find something out. I keep thinking that we're probably going to hear it soon. I would think that no later than conference championships, you would almost have to. They don't want to go into, I don't think that the Pac-12 wants to go into the NCAAs, and that's all their teams that are in it are going to get to talk about, right? They're not going to want to do that. So, although that could happen either way. But, let's talk about some of this other stuff for our Sooner fans and stuff in here. What did you guys think about the video that we did about the scheduling and stuff like that? I had a lot of response to that. If you hadn't thrown your opinion in on that, what do you think? Remember that, it's actually, and I was starting to see some things that made it look like maybe some of these teams are going to straddle top and bottom based on more of the existence of a rivalry. So there is a possibility that you could see more than how it was top half, bottom half, or whatever like that. I think it's still going to end up more that way. I still feel like most likely Oklahoma is going to be playing Missouri in some way because of the Big 8 ties. That's just how I feel about it, but we'll see. And I'm almost positive that they want Texas to play Arkansas. It just seems like that's going to happen. So I'd like to see Oklahoma play Arkansas, but then I think it'd be a good deal to have. But let me know what you think about that. Any other stuff that you want to talk about? We can get into some of the recruiting, but there's really nothing happening right now. I mean, as far as there's a bunch of guys that look very good that are looking at Oklahoma, but when you start looking at 4- and 5-star top 100 players, they don't make their decisions until June, July, So there's really, we can talk about it all we want to, but we won't know anything until it starts happening. Right now, I don't feel like I need to talk too much about that. Coach Prime stuff, I think I'm going to do some more stuff on him coming up in the future as well. Lessen their feelings. Okay. They are rivals, though. What were we just talking about, James? That was the thing. Is earlier. What's Dodd saying? That's what it's about. Yeah, right. All right, fellas. In other words, you're kicking me off. I'm getting boring. All right, I get it. I very much appreciate you all coming in. I will. Yes, I will be. Almost definitely be at the spring game. Yes. I'm actually looking at getting out that way, folks. We'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. Help me get a sponsor, and I'll be there for sure. Because I'm trying to move out that way. So anyway, send some tip money. Y'all could all sponsor me. All right, folks. Thanks a lot. Hey, Sean, man, the troll shows up right at the end. What up with that? Glad to see you here, though, man. Make sure you watch the replay. Folks, thanks so much for joining me tonight. It looks like we have some pretty good numbers. Make sure you hit that like button on the way out, and I'll see you on the next one, Tuesday.